Hi, I'm
Hi.
here. Hi, I'm here today with Rahel Bayer, the founder and CEO of the Bayer Group. And Rahel is also a former sex crimes and child abuse prosecutor who worked in the field of sexual misconduct and abuse prevention for over a decade. So thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
We are going to talk mostly toward the age group of middle school parents. High school, we know when it comes to technology, is a whole different species. Middle school, you still have a little bit of control. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would say you have a little bit more control over that.
Okay, so you move from this end stage of when there's a crisis to moving toward prevention. And so, what are the issues that you saw when you were a prosecutor that led you to move into this space that we should worry about right now?
Sure. I mean, as a prosecutor, somebody that focused a lot on sex crimes and child abuse, there's obviously a wide variety of crimes and crimes that impact children that I've seen over the course of having been a prosecutor, whether it's, something that relates to child pornography, whether it's abuse that happens in person, whatever it might be. And I think that in leaving the prosecutor's office, I went into kind of a more nationwide role whereby I was conducting investigations and doing training and really trying to prevent a lot of the very issues that I've spent so many years prosecuting. And I think that the idea behind kind of morphing from one to the other is that prevention is actually in all of our hands, right? Like you're talking about middle school kids, particularly. Many different types of crimes can unfortunately happen. But as parents, we actually have the ability to be empowered to talk to our kids and to really work to help prevent those crimes, whether it's stuff that's happening on their phone or online, or whether it's stuff that's happening in person.
So, like, to me, one of the biggest hurdles in my own parenting was I thought, well, not in my house.
Right.
Especially, when they were younger and I would hear stories. Now, sometimes there were embarrassing moments where it turned out to be in my house. And there were a lot of red faces over that. But
Mhm.
is that a common feeling that parents hold today?
Yeah, I mean, whenever I do a parent night, whether it's at a school or in a community, one of the first things I always start with is I want everyone to take a deep breath. When I talk about these really scary things that can happen online, a parent's first reaction is typically, well, not in my house, right? Or not with my kids. And what I think is really important is that instead, as parents, we collectively change the lens. And the lens is not, well, it can't happen to my kid, or it can't happen in my house, or it can't happen to someone I know, and say, these types of things are happening. What do I, as a parent, need to do to A, empower my family, but also to make sure that I'm not putting my kid in a dangerous situation because I don't want to believe that it could happen to me. So I actually really suggest that parents take the approach of, it can happen in my house, it can happen to my kid. So what do I need to do?
So tell us what we need to know. Let's start there. What should be our biggest fear when our kids are in middle school and we're handing them a phone, for example?
So, in talking about online safety, when you're handing your kid a phone, no matter, what that phone is, what type of phone that is, no matter what, if your kid has access to connecting to people, if they have access to downloading apps, if they have access to social media, it's important to recognize that there's this there's this thought that because a kid is in your home using a phone, they're kind of protected, right? They're in the home that feels safe, that feels comfortable, that feels amazing. So anything they do online, it's not the same as meeting a stranger outside. But parents don't realize that on tons of different apps, on social media, your kids, even on gaming, your kids may be connecting with people that they don't know, or connecting with people that are pretending to be kids. And so having a conversation with your kid about what it is that they're doing, what apps they want to be using, figuring out how to have an open-ended conversation about this, where it's not just, let's sit down and let's talk seriously about it, but it's an ongoing conversation, means that you're not only empowering your kids and your family, but you're also, as a parent, investing in starting this values-based conversation with your kid about what your expectations are. For example, Are they interacting with people who are strangers to them, right? Or people who they don't know? The idea behind social media and so many apps is we start to feel good based on the likes we get, right? Based on the comments that we get. Well, are your kids' privacy settings set in a way that you're comfortable with? Does your child, your middle school kid, understand the why behind it? If we tell our kids, this is what you have to do, and if you don't do this, we're taking away your social media or your phone, like, that's not going to work with middle school kids, because there's always going to be a way to find a workaround, and B, if it's a punishment model and it's a talking at them model, then they're going to try to find a way to get past your rules. So instead, it's about starting that conversation with your kids about what they actually want to be doing online and what they are doing online.
It's just so much harder than the quick fix. It would be so much more delightful if we could wrap them up and protect them. And it's there's no satisfaction in the conversation. First of all, your kid isn't going to go, Mom, I totally understand. I'll never do anything that will hurt me. So you have to keep, just kind of having this sense that what you say matters to them ultimately. So one of the things that I always struggle with is this idea that we should know what our kids are doing online. Kids know so much more than we know about being online. So if that's not practical, which I personally believe it's not practical, in my house, it was never practical. What do we do to ensure their safety if we can't know what the newest, most popular app is until it gets to a point where there's a problem and then we hear about it in the news?
Look, I think the first step is acknowledging, and this is not, I did not coin these terms. I believe it was Mark Prensky that originally did. It's acknowledging that on some level, we as parents are digital immigrants, right? Whereas our kids were born into this digital age, they just get it. They just understand it, right? They just know it. Which means that I think the first step is for us as parents to realize we're probably 8 steps behind. And we probably don't know everything that we need to know. So I think the first piece is, aside from having that conversation with your child and not just handing them a phone or handing them access to download whatever app or whatever social media they're telling you they should have, I also think there's a lot of research that parents should do. When I was looking into all these different types of apps, there was this moment where there was one app where I went to the app's website, like on a desktop, which nobody ever does. And on the app's, main page was, beware, predators are known to use this site. So be mindful that predators have used this in the past. Like, that's on a main page of a huge app. And so I think that even parents just recognizing, okay, I can't control my kid. This is not about control. This is about ensuring that my kid is safe. So what do I need to do to make sure they're safe? And the truth is, I kind of liken it. When I hear from parents, well, that's really hard to do. Like, I don't know how to have that conversation, or I don't even know what I don't know to do research. I always liken it to, okay, I want you to think about all the other things that you've done in life with your kids. Like, for example, when you took them to the pool for the first time, did you make sure that they knew how to swim? Did you make sure that they either had swimming lessons or that there were lifeguards there, or both, right? Did you take precautions even though you're not a swimming instructor? Like, you send them to school, or you send them to camp, or you send them to youth activities. Have you ever thought about the fact that you've inquired or wondered, about certain safety protocols, whether it's fire safety, whether it's, any safety depending on where you live, right? Do they do like tornado drills or whatever it is? You don't have to be an expert in something to realize that we care about our kids' safety in every realm of their life. So I think the first piece with internet safety is, let's realize what we don't know and let's own it a little bit. Let's make sure that we're actually doing our research, and there are tons of really great sites that can help you navigate whether there's an app that is right for your kid based on the age. And then let's not be afraid to talk to our kids about these things, because it's actually okay to say to your middle school kid, listen, I don't really know a lot about this app. What can you tell me about it? Like, what do you do on it? Tell me how you interact with people. Like, has anyone ever posted a comment that made you feel a bit uncomfortable? And those questions, if they're asked in an inviting way, are very different than, tell me what you do on that app. Who do you speak to? What are you doing? That almost has a threat running over it. And that's really what you want to avoid, especially when you're talking to your middle school kids.
You might even find you like the game.
Or that it's not about double checking or having to be, connected to your kid on that app, but you also might find that your kid wants to teach you about what they're doing because it's exciting to them and it's a way for them to connect to people.
Okay, so middle school, we hear a lot that sexting is so prevalent in middle school that it's almost 2021's flirting.
Yeah.
So if that is the developmental behavior right now, that flirting is sexting and sexting is unlawful, how do we go about? First of all, how many kids are there studies telling us?
There are actually. I don't know how many 2020 numbers have come out, but I think that there are statistics from 2019, from 2018, where typically sexting is happening between 12 and 17 years old. 1 in 4 kids will receive a naked or a nude or a semi-nude pic. 1 in 7 are sending. I think 1 in 10, will forward it once they get it. I can tell you from even just the parenting and then student workshops that I've done in schools across the country, I always ask a series of questions when I'm working with middle school kids. And let's define that, which is for some middle schools include 5th grade also, and some start in 6th grade, some even 7th grade. So the 5th through 8th grade. I always ask a series of questions. How many of you have ever been asked to send a nude picture? And the majority of kids raise their hand. It's usually somewhere between 60 to in the 90% of the kids actually raise their hand. How many of you know someone that has sent one? Same amount. How many of you know someone? And those series of questions really show a school that this stuff is happening. And I think that, first of all, kids don't call it sexting, they call it sending nudes. And I think that...
Wait, that's so funny. Yeah. So they have their own language around it.
They have their own language. Like if you say sexting, they'll be like, what is that? Right? It's sending nudes, right? Or sending a pic, right? Sometimes they'll talk about just a pic, and what they mean is a nude pic or a semi-nude pic. Look, this is the way kids are communicating these days. It is literally, the way that kids interact when they are interested in someone, but also when they're interested in just sending a message, right? Or even, not even a particular message, but showing someone that they like themselves or that they care or that they want to prove something.
And but there is this other piece of it, which is, I think the law hasn't caught up with the technology. And so how do we convince our kids without, terrifying them that this is a really bad idea on your part?
So I think it's really hard for middle school kids in general to understand the consequences of their actions, right? In other words, it can be hard to say, if you do this, this will follow you for forever. But the truth is, you're right. The law has definitely not caught up. And in most states, and definitely when it comes to federal law, taking a naked picture of a child, even if it's you as a child taking that picture, sending it to someone, having that on your phone or on an app, that's actually creation and dissemination of child pornography. And there are a lot of states in this country where kids actually have been arrested. If you go and Google, kid sends naked picture to friend, arrest, you'll see that there are actually a lot of places where the law has definitely not caught up to that. So I think that the conversation around sending nudes has to be an acknowledgement by parents that this is something kids are doing, right? Again, not from it can't happen to my kid or it can't happen in my house. Assume that it can. Make it very clear that this is something you're going to talk to your child about because A, it's against the law, and B, it creates a huge issue because kids think that, especially with apps where things, disappear, and I say that in quotes because they don't always disappear, that there's no accountability for it. So I think the conversation that parents have to have is, first and foremost, there is a little bit of fear that has to be attached to it. This is against the law. If you get a nude pic, if you send a nude pic, if you find out about it, you have to tell an adult, this is actually against the law. And there are serious, serious repercussions or consequences, right? We don't want a situation where a kid is then sending that picture to other people. And a lot of the investigations that I had done over the past, 5 years involve dissemination of these nude pictures. But there's also another piece that you have to talk to your kid about, which is, aside from the legal piece, aside from the values piece of why we don't do that, and giving them the language to tell their friends why they don't do that. It's okay for our kids to say something like, I don't want to do that. I'm not comfortable with that. And it's important to give our kids permission to say that. Say that. It's okay. Practice it, empower it, or blame the parents. Tell your kid that if a friend wants a naked picture, that they can absolutely say to their friend, oh, I can't. My parents monitor my phone. Even if you don't monitor it, give your kid permission to blame you. But the last piece is that we have to acknowledge that kids are going to make mistakes and things like this are going to happen. And it's important that when you're talking to your kid about sending nudes or sexting, that you leave room for them to come to you if they end up sending a naked picture and they make a mistake, because there are plenty of situations that can spiral out of control. And what you don't want is for your kid to be scared to come to you and say, I made a mistake and now I need help.
I love the idea of having your parent be the excuse.
Totally.
We should all be telling our kids all the time when they're in an uncomfortable situation to blame it on us. That's great.
Yeah, like when I'm in front of, sometimes when I'm in front of, a bunch of people, if I'm doing a workshop in a school, I'll say, you can blame me. We had that redhead scary lady that told us, don't do this, and just blame me. I don't care, as long as it means that you feel comfortable saying no.
Okay, here's my last question.
Yeah.
You have this whole discussion around secrets.
Yeah.
And I think it's a conversation that many of us don't really think about having with our kids, but the idea that there's no reason an adult should ever ask a child or a middle school kid or a high school kid to keep a secret.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
So when it comes to abuse prevention in general, by the way, whether there's something abusive that's happening online or whether it's happening in person, what we know about abuse is that people who abuse, specifically in the sexual abuse realm, engage in what we call grooming behaviors, which on some level is an abuser identifying a vulnerability in your child, manipulating that vulnerability, and enacting or engaging in creating this friendship or this connection with your child. And that can come along with gifts or treats or just time that they spend with your child to make your child trust them. And part of that is this secretive nature of what they're doing. I mean, you could imagine a situation where an abuser connects with your child and is doing really fun, friendly things with them, and then turns to them and says, by the way, don't tell anyone I gave this to you because this is special for you and it's just for you. And like, this is just special between us. And if your child trusts that adult, there's going to be a part of them that says, okay, that's so cool, or that's so special, or that's really so great. And what we know about grooming behaviors is that people who groom kids use secrets to essentially manipulate them and to silence them. And so from an abuse prevention perspective, I think one of the easiest things that parents can do is from a very early age, before middle school, is to teach our kids no healthy grown-up needs you to keep a secret for them. And if a grown-up, or if someone who's older, or if someone that is not, let's say, your best friend that you're playing with outdoors or something of that sort, asks you to keep a secret, whether it's a secret about something significant or not, you not only have every right to say no, but if you don't say no in that moment, if you feel like you can't say no, that's okay. But secrets are not okay, which means you have to come and tell us. And I can tell you, I know this from experience, I've had many, many calls home, emails home from teachers and counselors and youth people that I've worked with my kids over the years that have been like, yeah, your kid told me that if I use the word secret, I'm going to go to jail. So I just want to check on that, right? Like, it's happened to me so many times because it's a non-scary way of arming our kids with something that they know if someone asks me to keep a secret, that's something that I shouldn't do, and that's something I should tell my parents. And
we always want them to err on the side of thinking a secret's not okay. I mean, you get nuanced as you get older to recognize.
Yes, right? Like your middle school kid or high school kid, they may feel more compelled to keep a secret from their friend, but even in that realm, there are a lot of things that friends can tell each other where an adult really should be involved. So if we arm them young with this knowledge, then that really helps them in terms of abuse prevention in a way that's not scary. I always say there's a difference between a surprise and a secret, right? A surprise has an ending and a secret doesn't. There's nothing wrong with having a surprise party for someone. They're going to find out about it once the party actually happens. But a secret is never ending, and it's never healthy for a kid to be keeping a secret for an adult.
All right. Well, that is a great piece of information to end on. Rahel Bayer, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for being with us.